Now let's return to our top story and the developing crisis in Afghanistan. Reports of violence across Afghanistan as the country marks Independence Day this year under Taliban control, and desperate scenes outside Kabul airport as evacuation efforts continue. We can now cross live to Dubai, where Associated Press Middle East journalist BATRAWY joins us now. Good to see you again. Let's start with the situation at Kabul airport amid reports that it remains chaotic and dangerous for the thousands of Afghans desperate to leave. What's the latest you're hearing?
Yes, absolutely. There are still thousands of Afghans and also unknown numbers of foreigners still trying to leave the country. Diplomats and people with special status, such as diplomats, have been able to quite easily leave the country. But for so many other foreigners who work in Afghanistan and are concerned about leaving the country or trying to get out, and of course Afghan citizens who want to flee the Taliban because they're worried they could become targets of the Taliban for having worked with the United States and other Western allied countries, or who have simply been outspoken or are concerned about their freedoms and the future of the country and its stability. For so many of those, the exit is still very unclear. And the Taliban is controlling checkpoints now, obviously leading up to the airport, and are firing in the air and beating people back to avoid either chaos or to keep people in the country. It's really unclear right now as to why it is still so chaotic. But the U.S. Defense Secretary yesterday did acknowledge that the United States is currently unable to extend capacity beyond the military side of the airport. So it cannot, create like a safe passage within the city for people to reach the airport.
Thank you for that, Aya. So we're hearing that there are a bunch of reports of isolated incidents. People are defying the Taliban. They're waving their national flag to celebrate because it's Independence Day. Can you talk to us about this and how widespread it is in the region?
Yeah, I mean, what we are receiving is information about scattered, like you said, reports of people protesting the Taliban and also protesting the removal of the tricolored Afghan flag from city centers, and in its place, the erection of the Taliban white and black flag. So there has been those protests, and there has been actually some lethal force used by the Taliban to quell some of those protests. Of course, it's very unclear now how many people have been killed or died in this kind of violence, but certainly it shows a very uneasy security situation on the ground. And also in the Washington Post, there was an opinion piece written by the head of a militia who worked closely with the United States to ouster the Taliban from power in 2001, who says he is armed and his militia is armed, and he is in the last remaining province that has not yet fallen to the Taliban. Of course, it's unclear what kind of real resistance the militia could mount given the Taliban sweep through the country and control of the other 33 provinces. But certainly there is resistance and very uneasy security situation on the ground across the country.
And obviously it's natural to expect that resistance could have naturally built up over the years they were liberated from the Taliban. But looking to governance and going forward, what progress have the Taliban made in trying to put together a government with the inclusion of former government ministers and, of course, the female candidates they promised?
I mean, of course, these are extremely difficult talks that couldn't even really get off the ground in any meaningful way when they were taking place in Qatar and had U.S. backing. But now the Taliban is firmly in power, and so really calling the shots on these talks. And of course, the Afghan president himself has fled the country and is now here in the United Arab Emirates, where I'm speaking to you, where he's received, safe haven. So the talks are ongoing with the Taliban's leadership, but still the political leader of the Taliban has not yet entered those negotiations. So it's clear that there's still a lot of details to be worked out about how the Taliban plan to govern in the inclusive and open way that they have promised under Sharia law. Still so many questions unanswered about what they mean by Sharia law and how they plan to implement their very hardline and conservative interpretation of Islam.
And speaking of President Ghazi, just like you said, he's turned up in the UAE where you are. He's also saying that he's going to be consulting and returning to Afghanistan to help rebuild the country. How likely is that?
I mean, the remarks that we've seen him release on Facebook were really just an attempt at defending, I think maybe his very tarnished legacy at this point. I mean, you know, he said that he only left with shoes and the vest that he was wearing, in contradiction to reports that he fled with more than $160 million in cash, and reports from Russia and the Russian ambassador in Afghanistan saying he fled with so much cash that the cash had to be left on the tarmac in cars because, you know, the helicopter or the airplane he was flying in couldn't take it all. And so, you know, I think I think it's fair to say that he doesn't currently have a role in these talks, and that, you know, even those who were working with him, you know, people who were in his government, have come out and essentially, you know, really spoken harshly about his exit so swiftly out of the country.
Okay, could you tell us what you know briefly about the European Union, and if they're going to do anything more to rescue the Afghanistan who have been loyal, as one of their chief spokespeople said, loyal to the European Union for years and are now almost abandoned?
Yeah, I think EU nations, very similar to the United States and to the UK, are really struggling right now with how to get thousands of Afghan citizens who are under threat and the potential threat of execution or death into safe haven. And it really is a reflection of just how chaotic this evacuation and this exit strategy has become. Nobody expected the Taliban to take over Kabul in less than 24 hours, as they did on Sunday. Even the Taliban themselves have come out and said, we weren't anticipating a takeover of Kabul so swiftly, and they say they moved in as quickly as they did in order to provide security in the absence of, you know, Afghan police and Afghan National Army forces who kind of just melted away. And so certainly a lot of questions still about, you know, how these people are going to get to the airport safely and how they can get out. And, you know, the United States, just to add, has said that they are in negotiations and discussions now to see if they can, you know, if they'll be able to even, you know, stay beyond the August 31st deadline to ensure that every American citizen has been able to leave the country.
All right, I thank you so much for that, and we will talk to you again.